50 people have been executed in South Carolina. This is part 1 of the series. Joseph Carl Shaw, January 11, 1985, and James Terry Roach, January 10, 1986, both electrocution. Joseph Carl Shaw became the first person executed by South Carolina after the U.S. Supreme Court reinstated the capital punishment in 1976. Shaw grew up in Jefferson County, Kentucky, where he attended St. Edward Catholic Grade School, serving as an altar boy and playing tackle on the football team. He later enrolled at Jeffersontown High School, but dropped out before graduating. He married Karen Nagrich, though the marriage ended quickly, and he subsequently joined the U.S. Army as a military policeman. In 1977, at the age of 22, Shaw, along with two teenage accomplices, 17-year-old James Terry Roach and 16-year-old Ronald Mahaffey, committed a series of murders in Columbia, South Carolina, which ultimately led to Shaw's death sentence. The first victim was Betty Swank, the wife of a fellow serviceman who was essayed and ultimately murdered. The other two victims were Carlotta Hartness, 14, and Thomas Scofield Taylor, 17, a teenage couple. Carlotta Hartness was slain after being essayed several times. Over the course of many days, Shaw was accused of returning to the crime scene to have relations with the body. Shaw, Roach, and Mahaffey, a minor, turned state's evidence against his fellows in exchange for a life sentence, were not put on trial for the essay and murder of Betty Swank, who was shot outside the door of her mobile home after being released from the clutches of Shaw and his accomplices. Taylor and Hartness came from prominent, well-connected families in Columbia. Taylor's uncle served on the Richland County Council. Some observers, including Shaw's accomplice Roach, as reported by the state, suggested that the social standing and influence of the Taylor and Hartness families played a decisive role in ensuring that Shaw and Roach were sentenced to the electric chair. Shaw was executed by electrocution on January 11, 1985, at the Central Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina, at the age of 29. His last meal was pizza and tossed salad. In his final statement, he thanked his family, religious counselors, and lawyers, and apologized to his victims' families. On January 10 the next year, Roach was also executed by electrocution. His last meal consisted of fried shrimp, hush puppies, French fries, tossed salad, cherry cheesecake, and a soft drink. His last words were, "To the family of the victims, my heart is still with you in your sorrow. May you forgive me, just as I know my Lord has done. To my family and friends, there is only 3 words to say: I love you." Mahaffey, who was 16 years old when the crime occurred in 1977, was sentenced to life in prison. He died behind bars at 41 years old. Ronald Raymond Woomer, April 27, 1990, electrocution. Woomer received a death sentence for one of multiple murders he committed in February 1979. On February 20, he and Gene Scar traveled from West Virginia to South Carolina, specifically to commit robbery and murder. On February 22, they went to John Turner's home in Colton County, stealing a coin collection and clothing. Woomer shot Turner in the head, killing him. Later that day, they carried out another robbery at a Georgetown County residence, where Woomer killed a man, a woman, and a young child with multiple shotgun blasts to the head. That same day, they robbed a small grocery store and kidnapped 2 women, Della Sellers and Wanda Summers. The women were taken to a dirt road in Horry County, where both were essayed. Woomer then forced them down the road and fired his shotgun at them. The blast severely damaged Summers' jaw, though she survived and later testified at trial. Believing Summers to be dead, Woomer realized Sellers had only minor injuries and fatally shot her in the head. At trial, Woomer was convicted of Sellers' murder, assault, and battery with intent to kill Summers, first-degree criminal sexual conduct against Summers, and the kidnapping of both women. During a separate sentencing proceeding, the jury recommended a death sentence for Woomer. His last words were, "I'm sorry. I claim Jesus Christ as my Savior. I only wish everyone could feel the love I feel for him." There is no publicly available record of what Woomer requested or received for his last meal. Accounts of his final day describe him receiving visits from family and speaking with a reporter, but do not mention his last meal. Donald Henry Gaskins, September 6, 1991, electrocution. Gaskins was responsible for stabbing, shooting, drowning, and poisoning more than a dozen people. Before his conviction for murder, he already had a long record of criminal activity, which had resulted in prison sentences for assault, burglary, and essay. His last arrest involved contributing to the delinquency of a minor, 13-year-old Kim Gelkin, who had gone missing in September 1975. During the investigation into the girl's disappearance, police discovered 8 bodies buried in shallow graves near Gaskins' home in Prospect, South Carolina. In May 1976, a Florence County jury took just 47 minutes to find Gaskins guilty of murdering one of these 8 victims, Dennis Bellamy, and sentenced him to death by electric chair. That sentence was later overturned by the South Carolina Supreme Court in February 1978. Rather than face a new trial, Gaskins pleaded guilty to the murders of Bellamy and 8 other friends and associates, along with a burglary charge. For these crimes, he was given 10 concurrent life sentences, all to be served at Central Correctional Institution Prison in Columbia, South Carolina. While serving this sentence, Gaskins murdered Rudolph Tyner, a fellow inmate on death row, using C4 explosive. After his conviction for Tyner's murder, he received his second death sentence, which was carried out in September of 1991. Shortly before his execution, Gaskins claimed that he had killed 110 people. However, with few exceptions, these statements have been discredited by law enforcement and journalists who alleged that he was seeking notoriety. In a sworn testimony as part of a plea agreement to avoid trial for the murder of John Henry Knight, Gaskins was confirmed to have killed 13 people between 1970 and 1975. Overall, of the 15 people he murdered during his lifetime, 10 were under the age of 25 and 6 were teenagers. Gaskins was executed in the early morning hours of September 6, 1991 at 1:10 a.m. in South Carolina's electric chair. Just hours before his scheduled execution, he had attempted to take his own life by slitting his wrists, but prison officials managed to save him so the sentence could proceed as planned. When asked if he had any final words, Gaskins simply said, "I'll let my lawyers talk for me. I'm ready to go." Gaskins requested a pizza with everything for his last meal. Sylvester Lewis Adams, August 18, 1995, lethal injection. Adams forced his way into the home of 16-year-old Brian Chambers with the intent to steal. When he came up empty-handed, he kidnapped Chambers and attempted to extort money from his family. However, Chambers' mother did not grasp the severity of the situation during Adams' call and dismissed his demands. Angered and frustrated, Adams strangled Brian to death using a cord. Adams was the first inmate to be executed by lethal injection in South Carolina. During his final hours, he was visited by family and friends as well as his spiritual advisor. The former commander of the execution team, Jim Harvey, later recalled comforting Adams before the execution. He did not make a final statement, and there are no records of his final meal. Robert South, May 31, 1996, lethal injection. South was found guilty of killing West Columbia police officer Daniel Cockburn on April 12, 1983. The 29-year-old officer was seated in his patrol car writing a traffic citation when South fired at him from a passing pickup truck. Cockburn, who had only been with the department for 4 days, was survived by his wife, daughter, 2 sons, father, brother, and sister. South did not give a final statement from the death chamber, but spoke privately with his attorney, telling him, "I'll see you when I see you." South also indicated that he had prepared a letter with his final statement to be sent to a newspaper reporter. No widely publicized records detail Robert South's last meal request. Accounts of his final day describe visits from family and friends but do not mention his last meal. Fred Kornorens, July 19, 1996, lethal injection. Kornorens, 47, was executed for a series of murders which he later claimed were motivated by the breakup of his marriage. He first shot his ex-wife, 35-year-old Patty Jo Avant, in the chest. As she fled to her father's nearby mobile home, Kornorens stabbed her 69-year-old father, Harry Wilkerson, to death. He then pursued Patty outside and fatally stabbed her. Additionally, her stepson, Jason, was killed after having his hands and feet bound with packing tape. There are no records of Kornorens' last meal. In a final written statement, he expressed his beliefs and acknowledged his fate, but continued to maintain his emotional distress. He said he did not realize how sick he was until after the crime, claiming the breakdown of his marriage was more than he could handle. He added, "Whether God is ready for me to come home or whether he wants me to continue serving him here, I am in his hands. My trust and faith is in Jesus Christ." Michael Ryan Torrance, September 6, 1996, lethal injection. Torrance became involved in a series of violent acts after his sister-in-law, who worked as a stripper, claimed that she had been harassed by two men, 41-year-old Dennis Lawless and 31-year-old Charles Bush. She complained to her husband, who was Torrance's brother, and together they recruited Torrance to take revenge. The sister-in-law lured Bush to the family home, and when Bush arrived, he was beaten with a tire iron and strangled to death with a dog leash by Torrance and the couple. Afterwards, the trio went to the motel room where Lawless was staying. They sneaked in while he was asleep and stabbed him 20 times. Both Bush and Lawless were robbed after they were killed. A few months later, Torrance picked up Cynthia Williams, a 20-year-old sex worker, and shot her dead during an argument. Torrance had previous convictions, though the available sources do not provide details about them. Michael Torrance's last words were read by his lawyer. In a written statement, he acknowledged and understood the impact of his crimes. He expressed hope for closure for the victims' families and said he had accepted God. This contrasted with his earlier interviews where he expressed no remorse. Torrance's request for a last meal from an outside restaurant was denied due to prison regulations. He was instead served shrimp with cocktail sauce and strawberry shortcake from the prison kitchen. Larry Gene Bell, October 4, 1996, electrocution. Larry Gene Bell was born in Ralph, Alabama, and grew up with 3 sisters and 1 brother. The family moved frequently, and Bell attended Eau Claire High School in Columbia, South Carolina, from 1965 to 1967. Eventually, the family relocated to Mississippi, where Bell completed high school and received training as an electrician. He later returned to Columbia, South Carolina, married, and had 1 son. In 1970, Bell joined the Marines, but he was discharged the same year after sustaining a knee injury from accidentally shooting himself while cleaning a gun. The following year, he briefly worked as a prison guard for the Department of Corrections in Columbia, staying on the job for only 1 month. In 1972, Bell and his family moved to Rock Hill, South Carolina, and the couple divorced in 1976. Bell's criminal acts began with the abduction of 17-year-old Sharon Sherry Faye Smith on May 31, 1985. He kidnapped her at gunpoint from the end of her driveway on Platte Springs Road. Her car was discovered running with the door open, and her body was later found in Saluda County, South Carolina. Bell subsequently kidnapped 10-year-old Deborah May Helmick near Old Percival Road in Richland County. He was also a suspect in the 1984 disappearance of Sandy Elaine Cornett in Charlotte, North Carolina, who had been dating one of Bell's co-workers. Larry Gene Bell reportedly claimed he was Jesus Christ, maintaining this belief even up to his execution. He chose to be executed by the electric chair rather than by lethal injection. He believed that being executed by electric chair would allow him to be with his victims sooner. Bell had no last words in the execution chamber, and there are no records of his final meal. Doyle Cecil Lucas, November 15, 1996, lethal injection. Lucas, 41, expressed that he wished to die and felt filled with remorse for the 1983 murders of Bill and Evelyn Rayfield during a burglary. However, in his final statement, Lucas criticized the state, saying it had brought itself down to a level of the people who have themselves killed. Just moments before his execution, through a thick glass window, he told his wife of 6 months that he loved her, while one of the Rayfield's adult sons watched. After killing the couple, Lucas had stuffed a blood-soaked pillowcase with money and costume jewelry and drove away in the Rayfield's car. He was wearing a blood-stained shirt and Bill Rayfield's watch when he was apprehended shortly afterward, after the police spotted the vehicle. Lucas's last meal consisted of fruit cocktail. Frank Middleton Jr., November 22, 1996, lethal injection. While serving a 6-year sentence for stabbing a 13-year-old boy over a dropped dime at a phone booth, Middleton escaped from prison. On the run, he went on to rob, essay, and fatally strangle 2 women, 49-year-old Shirley Mack and 21-year-old Janelle Garner. Garner was killed in the courtyard of a Catholic school, while Mack was murdered while walking home from her night shift as a restaurant cook. Middleton also essayed another woman at a gas station, but she survived the attack. His last words were, "What are you people looking at? I'm going to the promised land." He chose not to have a special last meal. Michael Eugene Elkins, June 13, 1997, lethal injection. Elkins was convicted of the robbery and murder of 59-year-old Patricia Witt of Largo, Florida, on July 9, 1990, after she stopped to help him and another man who pretended to have car trouble along Interstate 95 near the Georgia border. Earlier that night, Witt had met Elkins and Rolf Garner when they assisted her in fixing her overheated car, and she gave them $10 for their help. During the murder, Witt was stabbed 8 times. Elkins was arrested days later after his girlfriend turned him in, having received 3 of Witt's rings from him. Garner, who was acquitted of the murder, testified against Elkins. Elkins chose to waive his court appeals. His attorney noted that he, once slight in build, had gained weight due to spleen and liver problems and was uncomfortable in prison, suggesting that his life would have been cut short anyway. Elkins' last meal consisted of fried shrimp, a roast beef sandwich, and clam chowder. He had no last words. Earl Matthews Jr., November 7, 1997, lethal injection. On the evening of October 29, 1984, 16-year-old Lucia Aymar and her boyfriend Eric Byrne had purchased dinner from a drive-thru restaurant in Charleston, South Carolina. While they were eating in a nearby parking lot, Matthews approached the driver's side where Byrne was seated. He brandished a handgun, aimed it at Byrne's head, and demanded money. During the struggle, Matthews struck Byrne in the face, breaking his nose. Byrne found $5 in Aymar's purse and handed it over to Matthews. Matthews then moved to the passenger side, where Aymar sat. She locked the door and tried to roll up the window, but Matthews prevented her from doing so and demanded a ride. When Byrne refused, Matthews shot Aymar in the head and Byrne in the chest. Aymar died from her injuries, while Byrne survived and later testified against Matthews at trial. Earl was just 20 years old and he had no criminal record. He had no last words and no special final meal. John David Arnold Jr., March 6, 1998, and John Herman Platt, July 10, 1998, lethal injection. On April 12, 1978, Betty Gardner, 33, was standing by the roadside near Beaufort, South Carolina, waiting for a lift to St. Helena Island, where she planned to work on her father's farm. A green Pontiac bearing South Carolina plates pulled over, and 4 people climbed out. John Arnold, his cousin John Platt, Cindy Sheets, and Carol Ullman. Sheets was Platt's 17-year-old girlfriend, and Ullman was an 11-year-old runaway. Arnold would later be charged with statutory rape in connection with Ullman. Also in the car were 2 dogs. The group told Garner they were heading to the beach and had been staying with a Marine and his wife, whose car they were using. Garner accepted their offer of a ride and got in. Unbeknownst to her, Arnold was an escapee, wanted on charges for failing to return from a weekend furlough from a pre-release facility at the State Correctional Institution Huntingdon in Pennsylvania. A short time after picking Garner up, the group dropped her off at the end of a dirt lane. The car then returned to where she stood, and the offenders picked her up again, claiming they would drop her close to her destination. While Gardner remained inside the vehicle, Sheets began to assault her, striking her repeatedly with her fists. They then drove her to a secluded spot in the woods on St. Helena Island, and there Arnold and Platt forced Gardner to remove her clothing. Arnold told her she would not be leaving and kicked her in the side. The 2 men continued to assault her, threatening to kill her if she did not obey. Over the course of the attack, Gardner was forced to perform oral on Arnold, Platt, and Sheets. She was repeatedly whipped with a belt, which was later wrapped around her neck. Arnold and Platt attempted to strangle her with that belt while dragging her along the ground. Platt stomped on her neck multiple times and repeatedly stabbed her chest with a pocket knife. At one point, Arnold tore clothing into strips to fashion a rope, intending to hang Gardner from a tree, but abandoned that plan after deciding the makeshift rope would not hold her weight. Platt then ordered Sheets to cut Gardner's throat with a broken soda bottle. When that effort failed, Arnold, assisted by the young runaway Carol Ullman, continued to strangle Gardner until she died. Sheets later testified that she had been coerced into participating, saying Platt threatened her with retaliation if she disclosed the plot. "If you ever open your mouth about what's going to happen, I'm going to get you. If I don't get you, I'll get your family." After the murder, Arnold carved the letters KKK into Gardner's body, reportedly as an attempt to mislead investigators and suggest that the killing was a hate crime carried out by the Ku Klux Klan. On March 6, 1998, John Arnold, 42, was executed by lethal injection at Broad River Correctional Institution in Columbia. He was pronounced dead at 6:15 p.m. Arnold maintained his innocence until the very end, delivering a final statement. "The judicial system has had my neck under its heel. I leave this world with my identity fully intact, my dignity untouched, my spirit sound and whole." Arnold's last meal was a sub sandwich, tossed salad, French fries, and a vanilla milkshake. On July 10, 1998, John Platt, 43, was executed by lethal injection at the same institution. He was pronounced dead at 6:22 p.m. In his final handwritten statement, Platt denied killing Garner. During his time on death row, he became a Christian and recited Bible verses in the execution chamber. Additionally, while incarcerated, Platt was adopted by a 70-year-old woman. There are no records of his final meal. Sammy Roberts, September 25, 1998, lethal injection. Roberts, 40, was sentenced to death for his role in the murders of Bill Spain, Kenneth Krause, and Louis Cackley. On June 19, 1980, the three men were robbed and then driven to wooded areas where they were shot to death. Their bodies were discovered 3 days later. Roberts was arrested later that year along with Wesley Copeland and Danny Ray Cocker. Cocker testified against Roberts and Copeland in exchange for immunity, stating that Copeland had shot Spain and Krause, while Roberts repeatedly stabbed Krause to ensure he was dead and later shot Cackley in the back 4 times as he tried to escape. The robberies yielded approximately $1,500. Copeland died of natural causes on death row in 1986. Roberts did not have a special last meal. He was served a standard prison tray. He also did not make a final statement. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.